Chairman Carr takes issue with NPR and PBS underwriting acknowledgements, vowing to open an investigation. We'll have an FCC 101 primer on non-commercial sponsorships. Carr also takes on broadband choice for apartment dwellers and proposed environmental rules for new tower builds. Remember that filing window for new non-commercial TV stations in December? Well, we have the numbers. All of that coming up now.
REC, FCC Today, Peachy Bradley.
This is FCC Today, the podcast for Saturday, February 1, 2025. On Thursday, the New York Times reported that FCC Chairman Brendan Carr sent a letter to Catherine Maher, President and CEO of National Public Radio, and Paula A. Kruger, President and CEO of PBS. In the letter, Carr informed the pubcasters that he has asked the Enforcement Bureau to open an investigation regarding the airing of NPR and PBS programming across their member stations. Specifically, Carr took issue at the content of messages that are aired to acknowledge underwriters, claiming that the announcements carried on the member stations violate Section 399B of the Communications Act, alleging that the messages go beyond mere identification of the sponsors, but also include promotion. He further stated that the investigation may prove relevant to ongoing legislative debate on whether taxpayers should subsidize NPR and PBS programming, citing what he calls changes in the media marketplace since the passage of the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967, claiming that taxpayer dollars are being used to support a for-profit endeavor or entities that air commercial advertisements. In response to Carr's letter, FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez released a short statement saying, "This appears to be yet another administration effort to weaponize the power of the FCC. The FCC has no business intimidating and silencing broadcast media." Commissioner Jeffrey Stark said that public television and radio stations play a significant role in our media ecosystem. Any attempt to intimidate these local media outlets is a threat to the free flow of information and the marketplace of ideas. The announcement of this investigation gives me serious concern.
FCC 101.
Over the decades, educational broadcasting has evolved. In the original Communications Act of 1934, Congress called on the new FCC to look at the ability to reserve spectrum for non-commercial educational purposes. In the 1940s, reserved educational spectrum was limited to school systems, mainly for the purpose of what we refer to today as distance learning. As time went on, the FCC would further reinterpret Section 399B of the Communications Act, eventually leading to the 1984 Enhanced Underwriting Guidelines that non-commercial stations, including LPFM stations, use today. In addition to identifying the name of the sponsor, these guidelines allow for logos and slogans that identify but do not promote, location and telephone number information, value-neutral descriptions of a product line or service, and brand names in product or service listings. While many know that for sponsors that are for-profit entities, calls to action encouraging a listener to visit or make a phone call is not permitted, there are other prohibited practices, such as providing pricing information, offering inducements to patronize a business, as well as speaking to a business's quantity, quality, and reputation in the community, as well as any kind of other promotional messaging. In addition, these announcements are intended to be acknowledgements. In other words, the station speaking to the listener, thanking the business for their support. In some ways, Chairman Carr's concerns regarding these announcements are legitimate. Over the years, we have witnessed PBS and NPR stations pushing the envelope and in many cases crossing the gray dotted line between identification and promotion. REC solicits and receives from Full Service and LPFM stations proposed copy of underwriting acknowledgements that stations want to run for a peer evaluation. By policy, REC takes a very conservative approach to evaluating these messages, especially considering that smaller stations do not have the resources for attorneys or compliance officers. This is further frustrated by many secular LPFM stations that carry program formats that are more likely to be carried on commercial stations as opposed to those that follow the public radio model, which favor less commercially viable music formats such as jazz and classical. A large number of proposed messages that come into REC are rejected due to violation of the fundamental policies regarding these messages. Historically, the FCC has taken action on these announcements when they receive a complaint. Over the past couple of decades, we find that enforcement actions against stations are more likely to happen if the station is in a smaller market, they run a commercially viable music format, or both, as the complaints may be received by competing commercial broadcasters in the market. In addition, some stations have engaged in riskier activities, such as the publishing of rate cards and media kits, performing live reads of acknowledgement messages, running acknowledgements during programming instead of during station breaks, running paid PSAs, paid interviews, allowing sponsors to voice their own messages, naming their studios after sponsors, and doing commercial radio-style live remotes at sponsors. REC Networks has an extensive compliance guide for full service and LPFM non-commercial stations at recnet.com/compliance. That's recnet.com/compliance. REC Networks has advised stations that given Commissioner Carr's most recent focus on underwriting acknowledgements, that all non-commercial stations, even those that are not NPR members, should thoroughly review their underwriting acknowledgements and their business practices to assure that they are operating their stations following the FCC guidelines on the nature of non-commercial broadcasting.
The Grassroots Radio Conference.
Now that I have the attention of the non-commercial educational broadcasters, the Grassroots Radio Conference is accepting applications between now and February 20 for stations that wish to host this year's meetup. We have a link to the application at recnet.com/GRC. That's recnet.com/GRC. In March 2024, former chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel stated that she was going to advance a notice of proposed rulemaking that would eliminate so-called bulk billing arrangements in multiple dwelling units, or MDUs, such as apartments, condos, public housing, and other multi-tenant buildings. Under a bulk billing arrangement, the MDU owner would reach an agreement with a single provider of broadband service and require the tenant to use that service instead of having access to competing services. Under such arrangements, tenants would either pay a negotiated rate or the service would be included as part of their rent or HOA fees. Such arrangements have existed in the past for cable television and telephone services in MDU environments. On Monday, Chairman Carr announced that the commission would end consideration of initiatives that would eliminate bulk billing arrangements, calling it a costly regulatory overreach. According to Carr's statement, allowing MDU tenants to have a choice in providers would have raised the price of internet service for Americans living in apartments by as much as 50%, and further stating that seniors, students, and low-income individuals would have been hit pretty hard. Okay, REC Bonnet off. With the exposure that I have had to the MDU bulk billing industry in the past, I can't agree with Carr on this. When you look at the service offerings in these MDUs, which only address a small subset of such communities, many of which are owned by major national housing corporations, in the cable television and telephone service fields, you would find that these providers may furnish a very limited service offering, such as fewer channels as compared to their neighbor across the street that is not under a bulk billing service. In some cases, bulk billing consumers also did not get access to the public access education and government, or PEG, channels that were available to cable subscribers. This type of satellite master antenna television system, or SMATV, was comparable to what you get on a TV when you check into a hotel. I understand that this latest move addresses broadband, but I wanted to address the inferior service offerings that have plagued the MDU industry for years. Broadband would be no different, with limited speeds and infrastructure based on how the service is arranged, slow repair times for outages, as it may require someone actually having to be dispatched out to the complex in order to fix the problem. Carr's decision only further advances a captive market for those who made the choice to rent or lease at a certain apartment building and not fully realizing the fact that they must use their provider. Many do not get the reality check until after they contact the provider of their choice and are advised that they can't get their service. Carr's move does nothing to benefit consumers. It only benefits the large property management industry that uses these types of captive arrangements for their tenants, as in many cases, they also get a piece of the action. REC Bonnet, back on. One of the other items on circulation that was purged last week was a 2022 proposal that would, as Chairman Carr put it, would have subjected tower builds to additional and needless environmental reviews, saying that the Biden administration's plan of connecting millions of Americans to high-speed internet service floundered in reams of red tape and a progressive policy agenda that needlessly delayed the promise of infrastructure builds. He stated that the Rosenworcel administration doubled down on broken environmental laws that would benefit nobody but special interests, and that he looks forward to working with his colleagues and stakeholders to assure that the government does not stand in the way of America's broadband builders and the important work they have ahead. And finally, from December 4th through 11, 2024, the FCC held a filing window for vacant allotments that were reserved for non-commercial educational television stations. There were 12 allotments available. A total of 10 applications were filed in this window, covering 9 of the allotments, meaning that there was one group of mutually exclusive applications. As of January 17, 6 of the 8 singleton applications have been accepted for filing. REC is tracking these applications on a PDF document that's available through a link on the REC filing window application tracking system at recnet.com/window. That's recnet.com/window. FCC Today, the podcast, is available on YouTube, Podbean, and in many places where podcasts are available. For up-to-the-minute happenings in the Media Bureau and throughout the agency, visit our website, fcc.today. The jingles are from our friends at TM Studios and Jam Creative Productions, Dallas, Texas. For assistance with LPFM, Full Service FM, and FM Translators, please contact REC Networks at 202-621-2355. That's 202-621-2355. FCC Today is a presentation of REC Networks, a strong independent advocate supporting a diverse dial and common sense regulation. I'm Michelle Bradley, SPE certified broadcast technologist. Thanks for listening.